You have all seen my movie. Even if you think you haven't seen my movie, believe me, you've seen my movie. Because my movie is the stock Hollywood comedy trope in which, through improbable plot twists and hijinks, the clueless, squealing city girl gets plopped down on the farm in the middle of nowhere. In the next 90 minutes or so, next slide, please. Except that's not the next, oh yeah, I guess it is the next slide, sorry. That's the clueless, squealing city girl. That's in the middle of nowhere. Worlds collide, chaos ensues, and finally, peace is made. Sometimes Hollywood presents us peace in the neat package of the largely unsympathetic protagonist heading back to the city with her tail between her legs. But sometimes peace is presented as that messier process of acclimation and acceptance. The toughest trial the newly minted expat has to endure is that clunky, awkward, square peg and round hole exercise of superimposing your own culturally dictated belief system on that of your new host culture, and with a little cutting and pasting, giving and taking, conceding and demanding, cobbling together a new one. And when it works, the exercise is an alchemy of skimming the cream off the top of both cultures and creating something that is greater than the sum of its parts. I moved to Umbrian in 1993, and I was already a vegetarian. Luckily, not a new vegetarian, so I'd shed that holier-than-thou affect of the newly converted, but I was a vegetarian nonetheless. Umbria is in many ways the Iowa of Italy, a region of meat eaters, raisers, and butcherers. This traditional rural area still has vast swaths of farmland, where the turnaround time between barnyard and dinner table is a few hours at most. Older Umbrians remember a diet that's based mostly on legumes and grains, flavored with pork fat and charcuterie, with meat reserved for special occasions or Sundays. But the steadily climbing standard of living over the past 2 generations means that meat has now become the mainstay of the local diet. Let me change the slide. The pig was and remains the foundation upon which the lion's share of Umbrian dishes rest for a number of reasons. Pigs historically had a symbiotic relationship with the land, as each fall they were herded under the oak trees bordering the farm fields to consume the fallen acorns and fertilize the fields along the way. Pigs are a smaller, less dangerous animal than cattle, and their care and feeding was largely the responsibility of the bigger families, of the larger families' children. And most importantly, pigs can be consumed down to the last centimeter. Nothing was wasted when a pig was butchered, and during a time when a family of 20 had to stretch out a single pig to cover a year, which was something often done in Umbria, this frugality could make a big difference. Most country families in Umbria still butcher a pig each year, though now the meat is consumed by about 4 people, and much less of it is cured, it's mostly frozen. And many urban families reserve a pig in the spring at a local farm, we in fact do this on our farm, which raises it for their clients until the following winter when it is home butchered. And the ingrained frugality continues. The pig is still consumed from snout to tail. So I've mentioned that I'm a vegetarian. I may as well fast forward over the years, the first years of avoidance when I would simply head out of town for the butchering weekend, followed by years of reluctant acceptance when I would hunker down inside the house for the butchering weekend. To my current wholehearted embrace, I now invite friends over. We have a big salsichata barbecue on our butchering weekend. It's been a long road to reconcile my American urban vegetarian value system with the Umbrian rural farming value system, but I've done it. Here's how. There's no way around this. The pig ends up like this. If that's a deal breaker for you, it's going to be a problem. I realize it's not so much a deal breaker for me. If the animals are treated well during their life, and if they're treated well in death, which they are in both counts, Umbrians, and I suspect many cultures which have a much more immediate relationship with their food than most Americans do, tend to treat their animals well. They eat well, they have ample room and fresh air, they're not given hormones or antibiotics or fillers, they're allowed to grow at a normal rate, and they're given adequate vet care. This is not because Umbrians are very soft-hearted about animals in general. In fact, I found some of their attitudes towards dogs a little bit jarring, but because they care about what they eat, and any animal who's been badly fed or stressed or medicated is not going to make for good eating. as an aside, and just to get it out there, everyone is always very curious, I will tell you that the actual killing of the pig is honestly very anticlimactic. There's no throat slitting, there's no trauma, there's no slasher film graphic. They take a compressed air pistol to the temple, and they're already gone when they hit the ground. It took me years to actually be there when they killed the pig, and then I felt sort of silly for avoiding it for 10 years. You can go to the next slide. Respect the earth. There's no huge environmental impact in family farm stock raising. We feed them the forage we raise in the fields. We use their waste to fertilize our fields. It's not a feedlot. There's no manure legume. They roam freely in their pens. They're never medicated unless, of course, they get sick. All the misgivings that I had about meat consumption in the 1980s in the US do not apply here. In fact, much of the Umbrian landscape, Umbria is very famous for its beautiful landscape, which is a patchwork of sort of tiny oak-ringed fields, pastures, vineyards, and olive groves. It would be very different if it weren't for this history of the small family farm that dabbles a little bit in stock, a little bit in forage, and a little bit in produce. That's our pig. You can see that his face has been obscured because he was underage. You can go to the next slide. Respect the people. To love Umbria is to love its culture, history, and people, and that is hard to separate from the dinner table. There are some practices that have roots in history that I consider indefensible, but the annual hog kill is not one of them. Once a year, the extended family gets together with various neighbors, friends, and passers-by for what amounts to more of a party than a chore. This is my family, everybody. You can see my, sorry, little aside, my father-in-law, my husband, and my son sit in the background. In Umbria, the heavy work of sectioning the meat, grinding mixes for sausages and salami, and preparing the haunches and shoulders for salting and curing is primarily a men's job, and the women spend the day bustling back and forth from the kitchen with pots of boiling water, spices, and lots of unsolicited advice. There's laughter, lighthearted ribbing, and hours of storytelling. Long-dead family and friends are brought up as if they just departed yesterday, and children, mine included, are handed knives and taught how to correctly cut ribs, make head cheese, and, in a subtle way, internalize the cycle of life, death, life. The day culminates in a sausage roast come dinner time, when the numbers swell, and often an organetto appears from nowhere to wheeze out traditional tunes. This is our meat. So have I begun eating meat? No, more out of habit than principle, honestly. But I have learned that though we began our journeys from 2 points that seemed diametrically opposed, somehow the Umbrians and I have ended up sitting down at the same table. Thank you.